Welcome to Focus on Albany. I'm Cynthia Pooler, and my guest today is my friend Alicia Purdy, and she's going to talk about a development in Albany that I found very interesting. So, Alicia, have you recovered from running for mayor? Can you hear me?
Yes, I got you now.
Have you recovered from running for mayor?
I think I have. I think I have. It took me, what's it been? It's been a good 5 months, 4 months. And yeah, it took me that long, but I am recovered. I was just exhausted. I wasn't sad. I wasn't anything else. I was just exhausted. It's emotionally exhausting. It's financially exhausting. It's physically exhausting. It's
Right.
just mentally, it's like a mind bomb all the time. And so I just needed to recover. I just saw Kathy Sheehan yesterday in Target and all was well. So no problems. And I had to evaluate a couple things. Do I still want to keep going? Knowing now how hard it is, really, in reality, I covered politics for years in journalism. It's not the same thing as being a candidate. And so um, I feel recovered. I feel ready to get back in the game. I've explored some avenues, I've made some decisions, and here I am.
So when you saw Kathy Sheehan in the store, did she come up? Did you guys say hello? Was it pleasant? What kind of?
I was actually literally running somewhere. I saw her for a sec, kind of met the flicker of the eye and kept moving.
Oh, wow.
I was not in a chatting moment. Had I had more time, to be honest, I have no issue there. I would have said hello. She's the mayor of my city, and I would have said
Right.
hello, but that was not the time or place for me to stop. I had to move.
So I read in the paper a very interesting issue that Matt Clyne, who was the Democratic commissioner at the Board of Elections, decided a couple of weeks ago that he was going to switch party and become a conservative. And I know that when you ran for mayor, you ran on the conservative line, and everybody discounted that. And I just find it amazing that a Democrat at this point in time should switch parties. What's your feeling?
Well, on an individual basis, it's not surprising at all because Matt Clyne is a Catholic. He's a pro-life Democrat. And as the Democrat Party is just dying off to wokeism, the average common sense individual is very off put by the radical ideologies that we're seeing. And so to me, it makes perfect sense. In fact, I would say if you're a Democrat with a genuine conscience at all, you would leave. And maybe you're not a true Republican, which leaves kind of that third party, the conservative party. And that means something different. I'm a Republican who ran on the conservative line. He's a Democrat moving into the conservative area. So it's kind of this, especially in the Albany area, in Albany County, it's a catch-all for a lot of misfits who don't fit in their own party. So maybe we'll see the evolution of the conservative party into something different than it was before. To me, a conservative is somebody who's even more Republican. But to somebody like Matt Clyne, for example, a conservative is something that's very palatable to someone with some Democrat ideologies still. So I find that really fascinating that we can find a common ground, not just Matt Clyne and myself, but different types of people are drifting into the conservative line or to the conservative party to find a fit that the major parties aren't giving them. But I think that's very interesting. I think there's going to be an evolution there. I don't know what that'll be.
Because, years ago, the Conservative Party and the Democratic Party was like almost aligned, where if you ran as a Democrat, you usually got the Conservative Party backing. And, when you ran on the Republican line, but you also ran on the conservative line. And people kind of poo pooed it, they dismissed it. And I think, I just wanted your feeling on this move that Matt Clyne had done.
Well, I think it's a boss move. Actually, he got in some trouble in 2020 because he wouldn't wear his mask during some board of elections proceedings. And I mean, he's a smart man. He's an attorney, knows what he's doing. He knew the implications of what he was doing. And people with that level of moxie earn my high praise. And so he didn't drift over to my side, the Republican side. So I'm not praising him because he's just like me. I just think that standing up to the bully tactics is paramount in our society. And so the fact that he did that, that is a very hard thing to do. What a bold move. And it really shows to me a fortitude of character. And I think it's very admirable. That is not easy. I was very honored and proud to run on the conservative line in Albany. And if I'm ever given the opportunity to do anything in politics, no matter when it is, I will probably always pursue the conservative line. I have good relationships with the Conservative Party in Albany County and in the state. And while there's a lot of Democrats, like you said, that really is a New York thing. I campaign or petition for signatures, and I meet conservatives who are really Republican conservatives, and they're out there. They're here, but there are just as many that are like, they're definitely Democrat leaning. So the fact that he stood up to Andrew Joyce, the fact that he stood up to Dan McCoy, the fact that he stood up to these people, and he sat there. If you saw the picture in the paper, bold as brass, he sat there with that mask off, and he made a fan of me. I was like, right on. So I think it's great. I think that there's some kind of evolution happening there, and I don't know what that will be, but I think that people like him who are willing to stand against the status quo, he like lost his position. They publicly came out and said, we're definitely getting rid of him. He didn't go anywhere. He's in the headlines again. So let's see what happens. I think it's great.
You know, I found what I found very interesting about your race is there was so many people who were disenchanted with the Democrats. So rather than look at an alternative, they stayed home. And that's not really democracy, I don't think. Um, do you think that Matt Clyne's move will help you at some point if and when you ever decide to run again? Do you think it'll be helpful?
Well, my race, the low turnout in the mayoral race said more about Kathy Sheehan than it did about me. But also, it said a lot. I learned an important lesson there about voting. And yes, there's apathy, and that's understandable after 100 years of economic depression and decline, et cetera. But there's also a significant amount of ignorance. And the demographics in Albany have shifted. We have a lot of people here from other countries that simply don't understand the process. I met with so many cultural groups during my campaign
Mhm.
that needed basic explanations. They understand voting, but they don't understand representation. And so, somebody like, party lines are hard to define a person. I don't consider myself a true Republican. I think a blend of Republican and conservative is a better fit for me, but that doesn't exist right now. And maybe Matt Clyne would say Democrat and conservative is a fit for him. And that doesn't exist either. So electing people that represent you is a really complex, you could vote for Matt Clyne on the Conservative Party and Alicia Purdy on the conservative line, but you're getting two very different candidates. And so, or two different ideologies with some points of commonality. And maybe that's the way that we're drifting. I think I'm proud, like I said, I'm very proud of being on the conservative line. I think the Conservative Party is a great party. And whatever differences or nuances there are between candidates, I hope there can be a common ground there, because all I did in my election was seek common ground constantly. And somebody like Matt Clyne represents to me somebody who would be willing to find common ground. Now, I want to quantify that by saying I've not met Matt Clyne, so I can't speak on his behalf. I don't know if he'd ever want to find common ground. I don't know if that exists, but in the most hypothetical sense, yeah, I think that as people are realizing they're nuanced people, and that hardcore Republican, hardcore Democrat, hardcore whatever isn't a fit for the nuanced individual who thinks for themselves.
What's the percentage of people in the city of Albany that are registered conservative? Do you know?
It's incredibly low. I don't know off the top of my head. I'm going to give you a ballpark figure. I did just look at some updated conservative lists the other day, and I'm going to ballpark it for you to say it's less than 300.
Okay, and the city of a little over 90,000, right?
This is the city of Albany. Yeah. And who's to say that they're Republican conservatives, or who's to say that they're Democrat conservatives? I don't know.
Right.
So
Right.
that's even further nuanced, because when I've gone to the doors and thought I was walking up to a conservative, which means one thing to me, I was not met with much joy sometimes. And it turns out they were Democrat conservatives. And the points of commonality with Democrat conservatives can be pro-life issues. They don't want to see unborn children dismembered and dissolved in their mother's womb up until the day of their birth. And sometimes that's a religious reason. Sometimes it's simply because you're a good person. Other times, whatever the reasons may be, that's a great point of commonality. That's a strong point of commonality. Taxes. I think that common sense Democrats are starting to see of lack of return on investment here, especially in the city of Albany, which is what I can speak to. For the amount of taxes are going up and up and up and up. And in my part of the city, I know in your part of the city, I'm out all the time. Garbage, the potholes are unbelievable. It's like riding one of those wooden roller coasters that cranks your neck when you're driving down trying to drive down the road. I think we're seeing a shift where the ideology has drifted so far, people are starting to notice something's wrong, and they're looking for a fit. So let's do something with the conservatives. I don't think conservatives should be the new Democrat. I don't. I also don't think they're necessarily the new Republican. I think we have to find a distinguishing fit for that party, that it's not Republican, it's not Democrat. Libertarians are very different than Republicans and Democrats. So, and they've got a really distinct flavor of who they are. I would love to see the Conservative Party figure out who they are and be another distinct flavor.
So, being a conservative, when you talked to people, and you said that you were running on the conservative line, did people embrace that? Did they back off from you? What was their reaction?
It largely depended on who they were, and it was completely unpredictable. I learned that very quickly. I approached it as from my own framework, which is I'm a Republican conservative, so I'm heavily pro-Constitution. I'm a constitutional extremist. I have Judeo-Christian values. I will defend life. I believe the government needs to stay the heck out of my business. I'm a really weird mixture of everything. But so I would walk up to the door thinking, hey, we're on the same team and I'm running for office. And absolutely not. They were, let's just say, Kathy Sheehan supporters, which kind of staggered me back. And because I thought they would be more like me. And I learned very quickly, at least in Albany, this is different actually in different cities, but in Albany, conservatives, I didn't know at the time, are truly, it became very apparent. A lot of them are Democrats, not all of them. They're just Democrats who are disenfranchised with the drifting of the Democrat Party into a radicalized version of some of our worst nightmares as a society.
What do you say that?
What's that?
The reason I ask you that is Why do you think the Democratic Party is so radicalized? See,
Oh,
um,
I think the framework has been there for decades. We just didn't see it. Well, so here's what I'll say. I mean, I'm not a political scientist, but the Democrat Party has been historically a big government party, more tax dollar. They want more taxes. And I'm really only speaking to the state of New York, but we see it on the federal level, no different. Um, Big government intrusion, nanny business, constant oversight. Hey, you can't do that. Heavy regulations. Kind of they're like the Democrat Party is like the helicopter parent of local society. And what's happening is when you have a permissive, and now because the government giveth and the government taketh away,
mhm.
we have to make sure we always keep that monster happy. So the drifting has been bully culture, essentially people with that are naughty children getting away with things, and a permissive, the government is the parent, and the permissive parent saying, oh, well, that makes you feel good, well, that makes you feel happy, rather than saying, look, we govern through law and order, we govern through, if you want less government intrusion, which is what the Constitution set us up for, here are some things, here are some standards we've all agreed to live by. You're not going to go walk down the street and shoot somebody in the face. Um, but if you do, you had your reasons. That's the Democrat Party. Here we are, bail reform. You had your reasons. And you're still a good person. And if you want to go run across the street and shove an old lady down in the subway, you had your reasons. You should get out and suck on your lollipop and talk to your therapist. I mean, that's ridiculous. It sounds ridiculous, but that's where we are. Look at New York City. And that kind of thing has become the definition of the Democrat Party. I mean, right, wrong, or indifferent, like it or leave it, that is what it has become. So people are like, wait a minute, something's wrong here. If you're a common sense person and you're not married to the agenda, and you're married to the idea that you just want to kind of live and let live, maybe that was a principle that Democrats started with, but it has grown into an insatiable beast where live and let live means you don't get to tell me how to live, not even legally. I want no legal parameters. I want no accountability, and I want no consequence. Whereas maybe the Republican Party was a little heavy handed. You will do this, you won't do this, whatever work to be done. But this has been a backlash that is stripping bare a lot of things. And I think we're going to see a massive shift to the other side because people realize this is out of control and there's no stopping it. It is like a runaway train. I'm using a lot of metaphors. It's like a runaway train. And the only way to stop it is we're going to have to put up a roadblock. And that may be the Republican Party. We'll see.
Hmm. So when you read about Matt Clyne in the paper, were you surprised?
Will you say that one more time for me?
When you read about Matt Clyne in the newspaper, were you surprised?
No, I was proud.
Uh-huh.
Like I said, during COVID, especially that, I mean, it's still unfolding. I mean, very few people are even, only the most radical people are adopting it, or maybe immunocompromised people, but the science just isn't there to make it even make sense anymore. But that he stood up and said, no, no, I'm not doing this. And I don't care what the consequences are. I thought that was fantastic. And all these rank and file Democrats now becoming left leaning, buying into the ridiculous hysteria of whatever the issue of the day is. He took the thoughts that were in his head and he acted those out to say, no, stop. This is, maybe you won't stop, but I'm definitely stopping and you're not going to push me around anymore. And that's what I really like. That speaks to somebody like me. I'm not easily backed into a corner. I'm not easily pushed around. And when I find people that are like that, that are willing to stand up and be loud, I think it's fantastic. I was very proud of him. I like I said, he won a fan that day. I was like, right on.
Now, uh, for the Democrats in Albany County, Dan McCoy has run on the Democratic line and the conservative line. The sheriff has done both. So they have no problem embracing the Conservative Party. And when it comes time to vote, people pull the lever for them. But yet, you, who ran on the Conservative Party, had trouble convincing people. Why is that?
because of the R next to my name. They saw, some of it's muscle memory. They just vote. They'll hold their nose and vote for Kathy Sheehan or a Democrat. Some of them just can't do it. So they'll drop down to the Conservative Party. In Albany, there hasn't been a big distinction. I'm hoping that people like Matt Clyne, like I said, help develop a new flavor for the Conservative Party so it has its own distinct way of doing things apart from Republican or Democrat or Libertarian. I hope they're leaning more toward the Republican true conservative side, but whatever, we'll see. The reason why was the R next to my name. When you combine, it's kind of like chemistry. If you combine a D and a C, you get this outcome, but you make one little change over here. It's like you get water or you get hydrogen that floats up and explodes when it's attached to fire. And so you have R and C. Now all people hear is MAGA and Donald Trump. And I don't have a problem with that per se. But I mean, people are going to think what they're going to think, but they really define you in a way that now suddenly they don't even know you. And they think you hate them. You think you don't want to take away their gay marriage. I never said any of that. I don't even think that, but they didn't even want to hear what I thought on the matter. They had already made up their minds because of the R. I did have somebody, a very high ranking Democrat politician come up to me I was at a personal event with my family, and a high ranking Albany Democrat official came up and said to me, "Hey, next time you run, you should run again for mayor or whatever." And they said, "Switch your party affiliation over to D and you're going to win. You're going to win." They said, hands down, you'll win. And I said, I might be the last honest politician in the city of Albany, but nobody in their right mind would think that I'm a Democrat. Nobody. I said, I wouldn't even violate my own conscience to switch over to the Democrat Party, not even to win. I wouldn't do it. I'm a principled person. I'm a person of a really strong character. I would not bend to the Democrat Party and say I'm something that I'm not. How could you trust anything? But that's the rule here. That's the rule here in Albany. You got to be a D, even if you're an R, but I won't do it. I would rather lose. And so I would never switch. And I would prove myself very quickly to be a complete phony. And I did realize that's what people want, though. They cannot get over the R next to my name. Some of that's the Republicans' fault because they've kind of gone in their own direction and people see them as a hard line, even though they're really not. But whatever, it's the press, whatever you want to say. People think that. So they look at my name and think, oh, there's a conservative. Oh, God, she's on the Republican line. Oh, forget it. She's Marjorie Taylor Greene. We're getting rid of her. And I mean, these are people that you see in the press, whatever bad press that they're getting, whatever they're actually doing, whoever they actually are, we'll never know. But if all you do is read headlines, you're definitely not voting for Alicia Purdy because she's got the R and the C next to her name. It is what it is.
You know, I had first met you the day you announced for mayor.
Right.
On the corner, it was freezing that day. And then the second time I met you, it was at the Westgate Diner. And at that point, you were saying that, you know, talking about the hurdles that you had to go through in running as a Republican. And I watched you over time, and you were fearless, and that was what impressed me. People,
I
people,
am a bold person for sure.
and people in Albany, they they're Democrats, but yet that's the way they are, and you're not going to change their mind. I don't see any boldness about them, and that was what impressed me about you. Your fearlessness, your boldness, you weren't afraid to do anything. Well, almost anything.
I have my
So
limits.
So that was so impressive to me. And I can't understand why more people are not like you. What do you think?
Say that one more time for me.
Why do you think more people are not like you and they're not bold enough to say, I'm going to make a change and I'm going to go against the grain and I'm going to do it no matter what people think?
Um, I would say, first of all, regardless of politics, some of this is just my personality. I'm just wired this way. I was raised this way. So there comes that to nature and nurture. I was raised to not give a rip, and I don't. And so um, I think the other thing is one of the things that everybody wrestles with. I'm not saying I'm free of this. I can just push past it. Is when you're not hurting badly enough, you're not unhappy enough, eventually will change. You're sitting, say you're sitting on something, or you got something that itches on your clothes, like a piece of fiber, and you can't get rid of it. It itches you all day, and you're finally like, I'm just gonna change my shirt. I'm just gonna change it. I don't care what it looks like. Just get this stupid thing off of me. Um, Eventually, people will stand if they become miserable enough. They will. Um, and I think either they're not miserable enough, which is probably the case. I would say people are very complacent, or they're willing to put up with a lot because of fear. It is just fear at the end of the day. Fear is one of the most powerful motivators on the planet. It's the direct diametric opposition to love. And so you either have to love something enough to give your life for it, to fight for it, to embarrass yourself for it, to stand up and take ridicule and criticism and pushback and consequences for it, or you have to be afraid enough to do something. And so I think at the end of the day, for me, I wasn't afraid, but I realized I love my city enough. I love my family enough. I love my vision for my life enough. And these are things I wanted to do. And yes, they were hard. Maybe I made them look easy, but they were not.
Mhm.
And but I wasn't afraid. Love and that desire to do something more compelled me past my fear. And so that's really where a lot of people, I think, just don't. They're held up,
So,
they're hung up by fear.
so we're out of time, Alicia,
Okay.
and um, you've been listening to Alicia Purdy, former mayoral candidate in the city of Albany. I'm Cynthia Pooler. This is Focus on
Thank you.
Albany. If you like this show, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter. Alicia, I always love talking with you.
Thanks for having me. I was happy to join today and have a chat.